千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. As usual, we are now together once again to talk about the Daodejing. So now I think we are ready to get into 33. 33 is a relatively short chapter, but rich with meaning. Here's what it says. Those who understand others are intelligent. Those who understand themselves are enlightened. Those who overcome others have strength. Those who overcome themselves are powerful. Those who know contentment are wealthy. Those who proceed vigorously have willpower. Those who do not lose their base endure. Those who die but do not perish have longevity. Simple words. Let's start to break them down. The very first thing that I want to point out for everyone, and I want to make a question out of it and invite everyone to really take a look at the original Chinese characters. Whether you know Chinese or not, you can participate. There is one character in common with all 8 lines in this chapter, one character that is the same that appears in every line. Can you take a look at the Chinese characters and tell me which one that is? And of course, I'll give everyone a moment to take a look at the Chinese characters and attempt to figure out the commonality among all of them. Okay, hopefully you have pinpointed the character that is the same in every single line. If you haven't seen it, if you can't really tell because those characters are not so easy on the eyes to decipher, perhaps it will help if I highlight them. Now I think everyone can see it. There is one character that is in common throughout all 8 lines of 33. So as for what that character means, I have a whole slide dedicated on that. You can tell because it's replicated throughout the entire chapter that there's some significance to it, so I will explain. For now, let's think about dividing it up into sections. So one way to do it is by looking at the meaning of the lines. So for instance, the first 2 lines talk about understanding. The first line is about understanding others, and the second line is about understanding oneself. Then in line 3, it goes on to talk about overcoming instead of understanding. So we can tell from that that the first 2 lines belong together, like so. Line 3 and line 4 talk about overcoming, but then in line 5, we seem to switch gears again, and it goes from overcoming to knowing contentment. So again, 3 and 4 seem to belong together. So what about 5 and 6? They don't seem to have the common theme like 1 and 2 or 3 and 4. But what about 7 and 8? So 5 and 6 It's about contentment. It's about proceeding vigorously. It's possible to draw a connection between the two to say that someone who's content is also someone who can proceed with vigor. It's not as obvious, but let's take a look at 7 and 8. First thing to notice is that 7 and 8 have the same length. They both have 6 characters each. And for both of them, the repeating character occurs in the same place. So this is different from all of the other lines. If you take a look at 1 to 6, you notice that the same character is always the third character. So this would suggest that the last 2 lines go together. Indeed, that's the way it looks. And now we can see that with the analysis, the chapter is revealed to be 8 lines divided into 4 couplets, 4 sets of 2 lines each. So that is the structure of 33. Now, let's go ahead and dive into the chapter, line by line, character by character, to figure out the meaning. So as I said before, I will talk about that recurring character. I'll talk about it first. We'll get it out of the way so that when we encounter this on every single line, we'll know exactly what it means. First of all, the proper pronunciation is 这. Pinyin looks like this, Z-H-E, so a native speaker would likely say Z or Z. Those are not that close, so it's actually closer to Z, as you can see here. So the actual Mandarin pronunciation is 这. Not exactly like Z, but Z is the closest we got. 这. What does it mean? Okay, well, it can take a little explanation to really delve into the meaning. It is most similar to the ER or IST suffix in English. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean like the ending of a word. As for instance, when you append ER to a verb. Let's take a look at some examples to make that clear. So for instance, the verb may be walk, to walk, walking. If you append the ER suffix to walk, you get walker, and that's the one who walks. Same with runner. You append ER to it, you get the one who runs. Same with swimmer, the one who swims. Jumper, the one who jumps. Flyer, the one who flies. And it goes on and on and on. In general, verbs can be appended with that suffix. So 这 is similar to that. If you add it at the end of a verb, it's the one who does that thing. And the other one is the IST that you add to the end of things that are not necessarily verbs. So added to art, you get artist, the one who creates art. Optimist, the one who subscribes to optimism, the one who is optimistic, and so on. So the role of 这, this character, is the one who, the person who, the individual who. It is usually translated as variations of that, the one who. So what are the variations? There are actually quite a few. And let me list them out. He who. And what follows who may be a verb. He who sings. will be one example. And this can be she who, that which, the one that. So what follows, all of this can be a description, but can also be a verb. Now, 者 itself is gender neutral. So he who is actually injecting the male pronoun into the original that doesn't have it. She who, the same, but female. So that which will be gender neutral. The one that is gender neutral. So those would actually be preferable. When we talk about he, she, that, the one, etc., these are all singular. 者 can be male or female, being gender neutral. It can also be singular or plural, depending on the context. So in plural form, it would be they who, those who are, etc. So the point that I was making is that the gender neutral nature of Chinese, of Mandarin, means that if you translate the first line, those who understand others are intelligent, if you translate it as he who understands others is intelligent, that would not be entirely accurate. Now, of course, it used to be that the convention in English is to use the male pronoun to indicate universal pronoun. So he stands for he and she. Later on, of course, there's the reactionary opposite practice, which is to always use the female pronoun to indicate universal. So then it would be she who understands others is intelligent. So the reason why I use plural, I think, becomes apparent. I use plural so that it doesn't get into a he or she. Those who understand others are intelligent. Instead of he who understands others is intelligent, or she who understands others is intelligent. So this is actually more accurate than either way. And the one who understands others is intelligent, that's also gender neutral. So question for everyone, why wouldn't I just use the last bullet that you see there? The one who understands others is intelligent. Why would I go from singular to plural? Any thoughts or ideas on that? Okay, it's because there are possessives following pronouns. So you can say they, those who understand others, and then followed by something else. So for instance, you can say those who understand others have their stuff together. There is referencing back to those, and it is also gender neutral. But if I use singular, the one who understands others has his or her stuff together. Wow, that's much more awkward. So you see, in translation, you have to be mindful of linguistic differences and also be exercising a certain amount of skill to make sure that the end result is sidestepping a weakness in a particular language and still producing from the original something that is readable. Let's move on. Most everyone who's listening to this is not going to be doing translation, so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. Let's talk about the meaning. Line 1, those who understand others are intelligent. And this seems like a positive statement. This seems to suggest that Lao Tzu is saying we should understand other people better. That's a sign of intelligence. Let's break down the first line into the 4 characters. The first character, 知, means to know or to understand. Second character, 人, means people, person, individuals, human beings, etc. 者, third character, as we talked about, the one who, those who, he who, she who, the dash er. And then lastly, 智, intelligent. So if you were to use the transcription as translation, you get something that's not really sounding like English. Know people, the one who, intelligent. You know, you sound more like Yoda from Star Wars. But if you were translating for meaning, knowing what the original actually says, you end up with something like those who understand others are intelligent. And that captures everything. You just have to put the one who at the beginning. So if you switch this, you'll get the one who knows people is intelligent, which is similar to those who understand others are intelligent. All right, so this is basically, Lao Zi is basically talking about the 2 different kinds of individuals in society. You've got the kind who are socially awkward and clueless. I think we all know who they are. We have quite a few in our group, myself included. Socially awkward and clueless, especially in my teenage years. They have no idea how others feel, so they make blunders in real life situations. So as an example, someone like that, like me, for instance, when I was much, much younger, that person cannot tell that there's something wrong in a social situation, just completely oblivious. Or that clueless person may become the other extreme, that is oversensitive, and keep asking, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's the matter? Until it gets to the point of annoyance. Or the socially awkward person may tell a joke, but then it's inappropriate, so no one laughs. The feeling in the room becomes awkward and clumsy because this person has misread the mood. So this is the opposite of line 1. People who don't know, who don't understand other people, they are not so intelligent. So then the second category number 2, will be the people that do understand because they are perceptive, observant, which means they can figure out what others are likely thinking or feeling, and they adjust their approach accordingly. As you can see, this is the smarter group. Now, I do want to talk about this group a little bit more, the group who understand others and are therefore intelligent. It's a good thing to understand others. And I want to talk about it because in line 2, Lao Tzu presents another step above in the people who understand not just others, but themselves. And that's more difficult. For now, though, I want to stick with the people who understand others, the people who are socially perceptive, observant, and know what to do in a group situation. And the more intelligence you have with this, the better your path will be as you work your way through society. So let's take a look at the whole idea of understanding others. As we look over our social circles, society in general, I think you will notice one thing, and that is some people demand to be understood. Rather than understanding others, they demand to be understood and may become upset when they, I should say, when they don't get that understanding. So they may complain, nobody understands me. No one understands what I'm really about. Nobody gets me, is what they may say. This is not exactly the behavior of the Tao cultivator, and I'll talk about what the Tao is in just a moment. For now, let me talk about how these people who are demanding to be understood, how they act. How do you recognize people like that? And could you possibly be someone like that? Well, let's see. In conversation, such people appear to listen, but are actually thinking about what they want to say next. The reason why they're thinking about what they want to say next is because they're looking for that understanding. Rather than to spend the time and energy to understand what the other person is saying, they want to express themselves. So they're not that interested in deepening their understanding of the other person, and they may pass judgment on others based on their personal experience. So let me talk about what some of the signs are. People who don't really understand others, or they demand to be understood by others without attempting to understand other people. That's not in accordance with the Tao. So when you talk to someone like that, that person may respond with, well, listen, when I was your age, and then goes on to autobiographical details. So think about that for a moment. When I was your age, I did this and that. I was this way and that way. This person is more interested in letting other people know what they are like, what they have experienced, much more interested in that than to understand what the other person is saying. If you are talking to someone like that, you definitely get the feeling that they're more interested to give you their backstory than to understand your story. In a similar way, that person can say, oh, well, I remember when something like this happened to me years ago, and here's what I did. Again, reflecting on what you said, but adding completely his own autobiographical details, reflecting on his life. Reason being the same as what you see here, they want to be understood. Or they pass judgment. When you go to them complaining about something or telling them about something that you did, they may come back with, well, I can tell you did that only because of XYZ. So they ascribe motivations to you, motives to your actions, and it's reflecting on how they would feel if they were in your position. Passing judgment, they may also say, you're just trying to do XYZ. You're just trying to be ABC. Again, passing judgment on you based on what they think, how they feel, what their experience has been. This is not the Tao. The Tao seeks to understand other people first before trying to be understood. So Tao cultivators do the opposite. They require themselves to understand others first. When you do that, you will be understood, and it will happen naturally because, unlike so many other people, you demonstrate a genuine care to understand someone else, a genuine understanding. So instead of giving them an autobiography about your life, when I was your age, I did XYZ, or I remember when something like this happened to me, here's what I did. Or passing judgment, you only did that because you felt a particular way, or passing judgment, oh, you're just trying to do this. Rather than to do all that, a Tao cultivator communicates quite differently. So for instance, if someone says, I'm not feeling so great, I'm really stressed out because of what's going on at the office, a Tao cultivator would reflect that back to the person who expressed it, but not in terms of your own autobiography, but in terms of what the other person is feeling. So this is all about empathy, all about feeling what the other person is feeling, and then asking probing, clarifying questions. So rather than, oh, you're feeling that way only because you're new at the job. Okay, well, that's reflecting on your autobiography. Instead of that, reflecting what they said, you feel upset and tense due to your work situation. This is a restatement of what they just told you, and you are restating it to signal that you understand how they're feeling. Then, probing question, can you tell me more about that? So together, you feel upset and tense due to your work situation. Can you tell me more about that? You care. You want to know more. You want to know the specifics of why this person is not feeling so great and feeling stressed out. You've demonstrated an attempt to understand them. That will be in accordance with the Tao. So I want to make sure everyone understands that when we talk about understanding other people, it's actually important. It's just not at the top of the list for Lao Tzu. But as you can see in this slide, it figures prominently in our daily communication with others. Let's go to the second line, which Lao Tzu regards as the more important one, and let's talk about the last character there. That character is Ming. So in this case, the pinyin is as close as we can get to the actual pronunciation in Mandarin, Ming. Let me talk about this character. If you take a look at the translation, look at the last character and then look at the last word in English. It's been translated by me as enlightened. So does that character mean enlightened? Well, not exactly. Let's see how we get to enlightened from Ming. First of all, the character is composed of two radicals. You can see just by breaking up the character into two parts, the left side and the right side. The left side is day, like daily day, like the sun. It's pictographic of the sun. And then the character, the radical on the right, the half of the character on the right, that's the character for the moon. And it's also evolved from the pictographic representation of the moon. So the sun and the moon together in this character, both the sun and the moon shine. There's sunlight and then there's moonlight. So they're sources of illumination. So this character is oftentimes translated as bright. If you were to look up this character in, for instance, Google Translate, it'll say bright, and then it will say that it's been verified by the translation community. And it's wrong. So the character for bright is liang, this character here. If I use the two characters together, Ming Liang, I'm talking about brightness. But Ming by itself has a slightly different meaning. It doesn't mean bright by itself just because, the assumption was that the sun and the moon together, that must be bright, right? No. The actual meaning is clear or clarity. In this context, it is spiritual clarity, which means wisdom or enlightenment. That's how we get to enlightened. used here. So you can tell this work of translation sometimes is a little bit more involved than one might expect. So the actual derivation of clear or clarity comes from the fact that when you have illumination, it means clear because when there's illumination, you can see things more clearly. Sounds pretty obvious when I talk about it that way, like duh, of course. So clear is what it actually means, not bright. Continue on. Let's talk about the line by itself, all 4 characters. First, I'll break it down character by character so you see what the lines are intended to convey. The first character means self. That's pretty much the only way to translate it. The second character, 知, again, that's to know or to understand. So 2 different ways to translate that. 者, the one who, the person who, the individual who, those who, the people who. Again, that's the dash er suffix. And then 明, clarity, or enlightenment, as we talked about. So the context, when you compare line 2 with line 1, is that those who understand others are merely intelligent, not a bad thing, but it's not the highest level. Line 2 is the next level above, those who understand themselves. To be enlightened is to have wisdom, and that is greater than having intelligence. It is also more difficult because many people know how to observe others and therefore understand other people, but very few people know how to turn the gaze inward to observe themselves. This brings us into a discussion of why understanding yourself is more difficult, and yet it is also more important, and the specific reasons why it's more important. What I have done is that I've prepared a story to illustrate why knowing the self or understanding the self is so incredibly important. So time for us to continue, and I would like to continue with a story called The Puzzle of the Warrior. So to relate the story, I'd like to ask everyone to visualize a powerful warrior once upon a time, standing, wielding a sword, facing 3 people in a room. So there's the warrior in the center of the room, facing 3 people, and the 3 people are the king, the high priest, and the wealthiest man in the kingdom. All 3 are in conflict with one another. So each one of them would like to kill the other 2, and they want the warrior to do that. So the king says, kill the priest and the wealthy man. The high priest says to the warrior, kill the king and the wealthy man. And the wealthy man says, kill the king and the priest. So in facing these commands, the warrior asks, which one of you should I obey? Who has the highest authority here? The king says, well, of course I do. I'm the king. Isn't that obvious? Of course, the king is the highest authority in the kingdom, and that's me. My word is law. Obey me as you obey my laws and receive the honor and gratitude of the entire kingdom. The high priest says, no, the laws of God are greater than the laws of man. My authority comes directly from the divine. And that is why you should obey me. Kill the other two now and receive the eternal blessings of God. The wealthy man says, no, that's wrong. Let's be honest. Money talks, right? All kings and priests bow down to money. That's a fact. I am the highest authority here for the simple reason that I am the one who will actually pay you for the task of killing the other two. What I will give you is money you can actually use, not the useless honors or blessings from the other two. So at this point, the question for everyone is, who's right? The king, the high priest, or the wealthy man? As you think about that, I would encourage you to type in your thoughts in the Q&A section while I continue with the story. The king disagrees with the wealthy man. And the king says, money is not the most important thing in life. What matters more is loyalty to the kingdom itself. You swore an oath of allegiance. What does it mean to you? I call upon you to be true to your oath. The high priest says, nonsense. God is the King of Kings. God's authority exceeds any human ruler. Why are we even having this debate? The wealthy man says, look, ultimately, you've got to listen to yourself and look out for yourself. I am appealing to giving you actual benefits, and I am not asking you to be tied by imaginary obligations to the others. So once again, the question for everyone is, who is right? Who should the warrior listen to? What do you think? So I'm getting a very good answer about, actually peace is more important than anything. That's correct, and that's what we've been talking about. Let me ask everyone another question in a different way though. This story really requires some thinking on your part. It's not just something that you listen to passively. Let me ask you this question. In this story, you guys know that Tao stories are very often symbolic. So my question for you is, well, who are you in this scenario? Are you the king? I mean, in our discussions, we talk about all the time how when the Daodejing is speaking to the ruler, the emperor, or the king, it's actually talking about you. And that's because you wield the power of the ruler in your own life. So are you not the king in this scenario? Or are you the priest? I mean, we're all here to study the spirituality of the Tao, right? Are we not more in tune with or aligned with the high priest? What do you think? Or are you the rich man? I mean, we talk about the Tao of affluence. In this chapter, we will talk about the true wealth of contentment. So wouldn't you be the rich man? So by now, I hope that you see where I'm going with this and what I'm getting at. This puzzle, the puzzle of the warrior, is intentionally told to present false options, false choices. What are the representations exactly? Well, you're not the king. The king represents the authority in the secular world, the power of hierarchy. This includes politics and government. So for instance, the head of state, the politician, the statesman, the official, laws and regulations. This also includes social settings and the workplace. So what I mean is the chain of command in an organization, the boss, the manager, the supervisor. So what about the high priest? Well, the high priest represents the power of religious institutions. So that is the clergy, the holy books, scriptures and quotes from the scriptures, commandments, and so on. This also includes the intangible powers of religion, the rule of morality to bind you, the appeals to your conscience, not to mention motivation through fear and guilt. Let's be totally frank, all of those are part and parcel of religious institutions. So that's what it represents. You're not that either. I think you can see that there's a little bit of all the representations, the king, the high priest, and the wealthy man, that is present in everyone. But to put you into one of those roles doesn't seem to fit exactly. In a similar way, the wealthy man represents the power of money, the power, in other words, of the material world, if you will, monetary gains, material acquisitions. Now, it's quite true what the wealthy man points out in the story, that money is sought after by everyone, including secular authorities, the government that will levy taxes. It's also sought after by religious authorities, religious institutions, which will not levy taxes, but solicit donations. So money, this representation is all about trade, economy, business, the exchange of currency, the exchange of value, stuff like that. So let me point out one thing about all three. Whether it's the king representing the hierarchy, or the high priest representing religion, or the wealthy man representing money, all three are transient. All three are impermanent. They are here today. They're gone the next day. They don't last, which means none of them is the Tao. So we certainly know that material things don't last. We know money comes and goes. Wealth is constantly won and lost. Physical things, material objects, they deteriorate, they get damaged. They can be lost, they can be stolen. So they're not permanent, they're not lasting, they're not eternal, they're not the Tao. What about the king, kingdom, empires? Well, we know that throughout history, kingdoms and empires also come and go. That is, they rise and they fall. Similarly, kings and emperors, the head of kingdoms and empires, they too come and go. None of them has withstood the test of time. They're all transient. They're not the Tao within you. What about religion? Well, we know spiritual teachings can be eternal, but religious institutions are just as man-made as kingdoms, empires, governments. Therefore, religious institutions are just as impermanent as they are. Think about this for a moment. Once upon a time, the gods of the Greeks and the Vikings were worshipped as actual deities. Today, they're recognized as mythology. So they didn't last. They're not the Tao. They're not the Tao in you. So after all that, who are you? Well, the hidden choice, everybody, is the fourth option, and that is the warrior himself. The warrior, if you think about it, is the true authority here. Why? Well, because he holds the sword. Who should he kill? Perhaps no one. Why should he? He doesn't have to listen to any one of the three. His authority in that room is higher than theirs. His is the hand on the sword. That's the point. The warrior represents your true self, your highest self, your conscience. The sword represents your absolute power to decide, to take charge of your destiny, to be responsible for your choices. You're the real authority here. You're the real power here. And it's higher than all the other choices combined. Does that make sense to everybody? If so, then a possible ending of the story is the following. The warrior says to all three, I'm sorry, but you are all wrong. I am the one who has the highest authority here because I am the one who wields the sword. I don't actually have to listen to any one of you. I don't actually have to kill anybody. As we go through life, we're sometimes blinded by the illusion of the false choices, as I have described. Instead of using the true authority of the true self to choose for ourselves, we can find ourselves bowing down to authority, religion, or money. We can forget that the true self is the greatest authority of all. So this is why knowing yourself is so important. As 33 says, those who understand themselves are enlightened. They possess wisdom. The better you understand yourself, the closer you get to the Tao. So to sum it up, remember, external power, whether it's the king or the high priest or the wealthy man, they are all illusory. They never last. The king was the secular authority, the high priest was the religious authority, and the wealthy man was material wealth. They don't last. So knowing others, the external powers, is intelligence. It's a good idea to understand all three of the above, the king, the high priest, and the wealthy man. Now, the other side of it is internal power, which is authentic and rooted or sourced in the Tao. So that's not the king or the high priest or the wealthy man, it's the warrior or your true self. And remember, the sword represents your absolute authority of self-determination. You get to use that power, you and no one else. So knowing yourself the internal power, is enlightened. So I hope that makes sense for everyone, and we can now move on to the next point. To summarize, it's important to understand yourself because you wield the power to decide. And the story drives that home, and you should not yield this power to external authorities or the lure of material wealth. Hopefully, that's making sense. No matter what happens in the world, you always have the power to assign the meaning it holds for you. That's what it means to exercise the power of your ultimate, absolute authority on life. Just as an example, suppose you suffer a setback. Suppose you don't get something that you've been working really hard to get. Yeah, it's a setback. What does that mean? Well, the meaning that someone else assigns to himself or herself may be that, quote unquote, I'm a loser, I will never succeed. That may be the meaning they have chosen to assign to themselves. The meaning that you can choose to assign to yourself is that a setback, this setback, shows there are lessons that I must learn, and I may as well start learning them now. That could be the meaning. So you have the power to make that determination for yourself. You don't want to give yourself the meaning that robs you of energy and motivation. You want quite the opposite. Next, think about, another example is think about what happens when a tragedy occurs. This could be anything. This could be tragedy for the nation or society at large. Every time we have a mass shooting, we have an opportunity to practice this particular teaching. It could be a tragedy that's closer to home, that is much more personal in nature. Losing someone you love, losing a family member. So tragedy, someone else may look at the tragedy and come upon the meaning that they assign to themselves as, what's the point? Like the world, life, existence is devoid of meaning. Why even bother? That could be the meaning that they assign to themselves. Or when you think about the tragedy from the Tao perspective, you could decide to assign a different meaning. It could be a powerful reminder for you about how fragile and precious life is. Therefore, the life that you currently possess, the life of your loved ones, are to be cherished. That could be the meaning that you assign to yourself. This is why it's important to be the warrior and wield the sword, and not listen to external factors, but to make your own decisions. Okay, let's continue on. Line 3, those who overcome others have strength. Those who overcome themselves are powerful. So let's focus on 3 first. Those who overcome others have strength. Now you can tell that 3 and 4 follow a similar pattern as 1 and 2. So this particular line corresponds in a similar context to line 1. Line 1 says those who understand others are intelligent, which is not a bad thing. It's just not at the top of the list. So this is basically saying that those who overcome others merely have physical strength, just like the context where line 1 was that those who understand others are merely intelligent. And this is setting up the next line to say that those who overcome themselves are the next level up. But being able to have physical strength, that's not a bad thing. Just like having the intelligence to understand people is not a bad thing. After all, out there, we see books that teach social skills and fitness skills because such skills are useful. Such skills contribute to life. Of course. So let's talk about the next level beyond, the level that is overcoming yourself. So to do that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to focus first and foremost on one character. The last character of line 4, Qiang. So what is the sound that I just made? In pinyin, it's Q-I-A-N-G, Qiang. I know people will look at that as Kiang or Quang, or they'll come up with their own pronunciation, but the Q sounds like CH, so it's actually more like Qiang. What does it mean? Well, it means powerful, forceful, strong. So in this context, Qiang specifically means spiritually powerful. And to be spiritually powerful means to possess authentic power that is sourced in the Tao. Okay, now I know that there are people who listen to that and become kind of excited. Let me show you the next bullet. So they get excited, and I've had this said to me quite a few times, because they connect power, spiritual power, authentic power, to the title of the Daodejing. So they say very excitedly that, oh, I know what this is all about. The Daodejing is the book of the way and its power. And that power is, of course, spiritual power. So this is what it's talking about, right? That's actually not the case. The book of the way and its power is a poor translation of the title Daodejing. Let me explain. The last character, Jing, that's translated as the book. The first character, Tao, that's translated as the way. So the second character, which people mispronounce as te, it's the. That second character means virtue. So it's actually virtue and not power. So what people have done, and this is done all the time in the Western study of the Tao, people try to make their own, create their own thing, their own take by twisting the original. So they'll say, well, you see, virtue is a kind of divine power. It's a kind of spiritual power. So I'm going to translate virtue as power. And now I have a title translation for the Daodejing that sounds really cool. The book of the way and its power. Yeah, but it's a wrong translation. So a much closer translation will be the book of the way and virtue. That's what it means. Doesn't sound quite as cool as this made up title, a Western distortion of the original, but that's the reality of it. Moving on. Having talked about that character, let's talk about the line. Those who overcome others are powerful. How do we get there? Here's the breakdown of the characters. 自, again, the first character can only be translated one way, and that's the self. Myself, themselves, ourselves, yourself, the self. And then the second character means victory or win. The third character, same character that we've talked about, the one who. And then the last character is the Qiang character we just talked about, powerful. So now In order to translate, you would take the one who and put that in the beginning to swap the order. So to change the Mandarin syntax to the English syntax, so you get the one who wins over the self is powerful, or the one who defeats the self, overcomes the self, is truly powerful. All right. Now, we say that because being physically strong cannot compare to having the strength of character to overcome yourself. What am I talking about here? Well, let's talk about some examples. Where can it be difficult to overcome yourself? Number one, procrastination, lack of motivation, getting yourself off the couch. Inertia, resistance to taking action. Does that happen? Of course it does. What is the cause? Perhaps a lack of energy. Or perhaps something else. Perhaps it's a task you are not looking forward to. Either way, having the strength of character to overcome that inertia shows that you are truly strong, because many people cannot do that. There's any number of people out there who cannot overcome their own inertia. Whether it's to handle procrastination, to get something done that really needs to be done, or to be motivated to pursue a particular goal, over and over again, we see that this is the case. Most people are not that great about overcoming themselves in this particular context. Now, it gets even worse. Some people are not just procrastinating, but addicted. This can range from addictive behavior in general, which could be relatively harmless. It could be addicted to something like television or video games, social media, but it could be also very serious, like substance abuse, drugs, alcohol. Addiction, a serious topic. So someone can be physically very strong and yet have no ability to handle themselves as their addiction spirals out of control. Can that happen? Of course it can. Many people suffer in that particular trap. This is not easy. Another one, tendency to sabotage yourself due to inner fears. Inner fears like, what if I don't measure up? What if they discover what a fraud I am? Then it leads to perhaps subconsciously self-sabotaging behavior, so you can fail and not make the attempt. So can someone overcome a tendency like this? Yes, but again, not easy. If you have that tendency, you have that fear, you have to deal with the fear in order to overcome the tendency. Lastly, closely related, think about someone who's very insecure, who has a deep-seated negative self-image. This can lead to overcompensation, which manifests as a monstrous ego or arrogance. So can someone overcome that if that is a problem? It's possible, but again, very difficult. So being able to overcome yourself in these subcategories that you see here, much easier said than done. Anyone that can do it, they are truly powerful. They truly have that spiritual strength. Okay, let's move on. There's another important concept that we need to, that I'm hoping that we can get to today. Line 5, those who know contentment are wealthy. That seems to make a lot of sense. If you are discontent, if you are not satisfied with what you have, then it doesn't matter how much you have. you still have the mentality of poverty. But let's break down the characters one by one. So 4 characters. The first one is the know or understand. Second one is contentment or sufficiency. And then the third character, the same as before, the one who. And then the last character is wealthy, rich. So now let me ask everyone this question. What does being wealthy mean? What is the measuring stick? What is the bar that you have to go above in order to be wealthy? In the past, we used to say millionaire. So $1 million used to be the benchmark, the milestone for wealth. Nowadays, it's more like billionaire. We talk about billionaires. That seems like the new standard. So the new standard is like 1,000 times more than the old standard. So what do you think? Is being a millionaire or billionaire the definition of wealthy? Lao Tzu did not think so. What Lao Tzu said was that it isn't so much the dollar amount, but the right mental state, the proper mental state. So for instance, you can have a lot of money in your bank account, but still feel it's not enough. Regardless of how much you have, you are poor in your mind. Okay? Let's continue that train of thought for just a little bit. I want to also ask everyone to think about the opposite. So we've talked about one extreme where someone may have a lot in the bank account, but then feels like there's not enough. So that's the mentality of poverty. There's another extreme as well. There's the opposite extreme. That opposite extreme is a kind of self-delusion where someone who doesn't have a lot is convinced that, well, but I'm happy. I am truly happy. Who needs money anyway? I don't need money. I've got happiness. I am truly happy without money. Money is the root of all evil, etc. This, from the perspective of the Tao, is a self-delusion. And I know people aren't used to hearing someone talking about spirituality talk about something like this. Typically, in the West, there is a certain kind of nobility attached to poverty, but not in the Tao. In the Tao, we recognize this kind of self-delusion, and here's the observation. The illusory bubble can be maintained until something bad happens that requires financial resources. It may be an accident of some kind, maybe an auto accident, maybe some other kind of accident. It may be a medical issue of some kind, from the relatively minor to the very severe, life-threatening. Whatever the case may be, something bad happens that requires financial resources. Then the bubble bursts. It does not survive its encounter with reality. I have friends like this. I have friends who don't have a whole lot, but they constantly talk about how they have everything they need. There's happiness in their lives, and they seem okay until they hit upon a situation that requires money. Then the bubble bursts, and what they do is that in this day and age, they go online and they set up a GoFundMe. Okay, that's not the Tao. What if people don't come through for you? What then? So the actual Tao, the authentic Tao teaching, is between the extremes. It's a point of moderation between having a lot but then feeling like you don't have enough, And the other extreme, which is not having a whole bunch, but feeling like you have sufficiently, that you are sufficiently happy. Those are not the Tao. The point in the middle, somewhere in the middle, is the following. A moderate approach. This is what Lao Tzu is advocating. A moderate approach where you are self-sufficient, which means you've got financial resources that you've been working to build. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. You know it, you are self-sufficient, you enjoy it, you appreciate it. That's really the Tao. So in order to bring this to life, I would like to tell another story, a story that is called So Lucky. It's an illustration of true wealth. To understand the story, this is something that I heard not from a Tao-related source, from a female writer who doesn't write about the Tao specifically, but who does write about spiritual issues, spiritual thoughts, concerns. So when I read her writing, I find that it's very enriching and that I see the Tao everywhere. So I certainly see a lot of Tao in her story as well. In that story, the writer is talking about someone she knew from before at a place where she used to live. So here's the story, So Lucky. And I will tell it as if I am the female writer. She says, there used to be a small convenience store not too far from where I used to live. One day, out of curiosity, I decided to go in. I wanted to do a little browsing, I wanted to check it out. That's when I first encountered the owner of the store. She is an elegant lady who sat behind the counter. She greeted me with a beautiful smile, and her smile seemed to light up the little store. I liked her immediately. So I looked around in the store. In addition to the usual convenience store items, I noticed that the store owner, this elegant lady, she also had a section, a small section with her handmade arts and crafts. And I saw that she was really good at arts and crafts. My eyes were drawn to a small bag she made for storing knickknacks. It was a light shade of green, like new grass. So I complimented her. I said, this bag is the color of spring. It is particularly beautiful. So she flashed her beautiful smile again and she said, I am so lucky to have someone who understands my feelings so precisely. So I bought the bag from her and I became a regular customer. I visited the convenience store all the time. I soon learned that so lucky was a phrase she liked to say. She said it all the time. And it was one of the reasons why I enjoyed visiting her store so much. For whatever reason, there just weren't that many people in my life who felt the joy of life as deeply as this lady did. Indeed, now that I think about it, most of the people I knew, they were all doing, pretty well. Objectively speaking. Objectively speaking, they did well, but they didn't act that way. They all seemed to feel like they were lacking something. They did not seem like they were lucky in any way. They certainly wouldn't say that. They would not say that they are so lucky. One day, I passed by the convenience store at around noontime, and I noticed that the store owner was taking a lunch break, munching on a sandwich. I greeted her and said, "You know what? You should try the noodle soup in the restaurant across the street. It's really good." She said, "I'm sure it is, but I love this sandwich." She said, "One of my customers made it for me today. She's an 80-year-old lady, still very active. Can you believe it? I am so lucky to have friends like her." And about a year later, I went on vacation. I did a little mountain climbing. When I came back, I gave her beautiful postcards that I brought back. She looked through them and she was evidently enjoying the beautiful sights. She marveled at the photographs of the gorgeous mountain views. "So lucky," she exclaimed. And to me, it sounded like she was congratulating me, or maybe she was feeling like the two of us were sharing in the good luck to enjoy all that natural beauty. So I said, "You should take some time off. You can have somebody watch your store, right? And you can visit the mountain yourself." So she smiled. She said, "Do they have an aerial tram that takes you to the mountaintop?" And I nodded. "Oh, they do? Wow," she said. "That is so lucky. I would love to go." So I said, "Oh, no need to take the aerial tram. Just climb the hiking trail and then we'll take you all the way to the peak." Yes, yes. So she smiled, her beautiful smile, and she said, "That will be like a dream come true." Shortly after that, I had to move away for work. My life got really hectic, got really busy. So I didn't think about her for quite some time until one day I happened to be in that area, my old stomping grounds. Suddenly, I remember I hadn't been to the convenience store for years. I hurried there, only to find the convenience store was gone. There was an old lady sitting on a bench nearby, so I went to her. I asked her what happened to the convenience store. She said, "Oh, the store moved away," but she had no idea where it moved to. Then the old lady said, "It's not easy, for a paraplegic woman." I'm sorry, who? Who are you talking about? Paraplegic woman. The store owner. "Oh, you didn't know?" So realization flooded in. Now, I felt that it made a lot of sense. Now that I think about it, I realized that the lady was always behind the counter. She was actually in a wheelchair the entire time, managing her store. It was just that her smile and her joy were so pure and so authentic that never once did I ever get the feeling that she was lacking anything. And like an idiot, I even encouraged her to go climb a mountain. So thoughtless. So many feelings went through me in that moment. Looking at where that little convenience store used to be, I thought that I could see her beautiful smile in my mind one last time. So that is the story of So Lucky. Now I want to ask everyone to go a little deeper into it. and think about the meaning. True wealth. So, cultivators of the Tao would be able to identify with the feeling of contentment demonstrated by the store owner to find joy regardless of the level that they are cultivating at. Perhaps they are in the process of building more resources for themselves and may not have a whole lot at the moment. It doesn't matter. They can be very happy while engaged in the process of building that nest egg. What they do not do is that, unlike my friends who set up GoFundMe at the drop of a hat, cultivators of the Tao do not use the Tao to talk themselves into complacency. They don't say, oh, I have everything I need. I don't need anything more than what I have, which is very little and insufficient for a rainy day. So for someone who studies the Tao to talk themselves into complacency, like I have more than I will ever need, well, that's not true. It's also a distortion of the original teachings. So real cultivators of the Tao don't do that. What they actually do is that they use the Tao to help them attain successive goals while also enjoying the process of attainment. So let me be very specific. Among the people who study the Tao, some sort of study a variant of the Tao, which is the Western distortion, as I have described. They may say the Tao will provide. Well, actually, the Tao may not provide. It depends. You actually have to be proactive and take action. After that, the Tao will support and assist. That's how it really works. And I do appreciate people saying, I already have enough. That's great. We've made it this far in life. And that's a good thing. But now, from the Tao perspective, we need to look ahead into the future and plan for what's next. Not just what's coming, but also contingencies. What's coming up? What may I need? What's plan B? So this all goes into the feeling of contentment and feeling the fortunate blessings of life in the Tao itself. So there is a lot, as you are working on building your resources, there's a lot that Tao cultivators will find to appreciate along the way. For instance, let's start with the self. If you have even some of these things, they're all blessings. If you have your health, or you are able to recover your health, that's a blessing. If you are able to learn, you've had opportunities to exercise your creativity, opportunities to grow and develop yourself, to improve upon yourself, to create a better version of yourself. That's a blessing. That's something to appreciate. That's with the self. How about other people? Perhaps partners in an enterprise, in an endeavor, teammates, people on your team, people on your side, loved ones, friends, family. Easy to appreciate having people like that in your life. What a blessing. And with the world, the universe, this incredible, intricate, amazing universe, nature, the beauty of nature, to be able to commune with nature, to be able to be in touch with nature. Animals are cool. To be in contact with animals is one of the best practices. It brings a peace of mind. It's not a big surprise that veterans, for instance, with post-traumatic stress syndrome benefit greatly from having a pet, someone to keep them company, and someone who may be trained to recognize signs of distress. So animals have the power to heal. Flowers, trees, so much more. Everywhere we look in nature, incredible beauty. So much to appreciate. So much for which to express gratitude. So here's the bottom line. At the end of the day, here's the conclusion. The wealth of Tao cultivators comes not from the balance of the bank account, but the balance of living life in harmony. So that is the story of So Lucky. I want to move on to talk about the next line, line 6. Line 6 says, those proceed vigorously have willpower. What I've done here is that I've broken out the first 3 characters to analyze them, to break them out. So the first character, Chuang, powerful, forceful. Second character, Xing, to travel, to go. And the third character, the same familiar character, which means the one who. So you have to flip this around to make it fit English syntax. So the one who travels powerfully, the one who proceeds vigorously, that's what it says. Or here I can put up the meaning here, the one who goes forward with vigor. So just by this line, just by talking about the one who proceeds vigorously, you can tell by this that in Lao Tzu, in the real Tao, in the real teachings of Lao Tzu, there isn't some random kind of let the wind take you wherever it may. That's not the Tao at all. That's the opposite of the Tao. A lot of times I find something like that masquerading as Tao wisdom, and I really have to object to that. It's not the Tao. Lao Tzu doesn't talk about some random kind of let the wind take you wherever it may. Instead, Lao Tzu talks more like you should have clarity on your destination, and you should go there infused with a powerful purpose. That's what it takes to travel the journey of 1,000 miles. That's what it takes to build this grand tower of 9 levels. So a little bit more about this. Let's include the entire line. So I fully understand and appreciate that when you understand this line correctly, when you have a proper understanding, some Western readers will be surprised because in their surface level exploration of the Tao, they have come to think of the Tao as being about doing whatever they please. Hence this bullet. Proper understanding of this line may surprise some Western readers who think the Tao is all about doing whatever they want. It's not. Now, when I tell them that that's actually not the Tao, they may say, well, but what about the carefree wandering of Zhuangzi? That sounds like doing whatever you want. So here's the reality of it. Zhuangzi was very much aligned with what Lao Tzu expressed here. This is why when Zhuangzi wrote about the majestic flight of the painbird, he fully intended to have that flight, the painbird, be a symbol, the metaphor for the vigorous journey. The flight is the journey. There's a clear destination. There's no randomness. There's no whim associated with that. So the real problem is that the whole concept of carefree wandering is often misunderstood. Let me explain that concept, and then we're going to have to jump to the summary for today. I'm very happy that we got a chance to talk about the warrior and also the story of So Lucky. They illustrate two of the main points in this chapter. For now, though, let's wrap up our discussion on carefree wandering. So the carefree wandering concept from Lao Tzu is often misunderstood. It doesn't contradict line 6 here. Carefree wandering is actually not random wandering driven by whim without set direction, destination, or intent. If you read some of the translations of the Daodejing out there, you would actually see the second bullet here being expressed in the translation. It is not only an incorrect translation, but it's also something that's purely invented in the West and not the original, authentic Tao at all. So here's where things go wrong, and here's how we can set things right. When you are clear on where you are going, and you are well on your way to getting there, that's when you can truly relax and be carefree. That's what it means. When everything is in motion, you are already on that train going to the destination you want to go, then it's time to be carefree. So in the Tao, it's entirely possible to proceed vigorously, line 6, and fully enjoy the journey without being stressed out at all. And indeed, it's the only way that one can enjoy the journey is to not be stressed out, to be fully in it. So for this particular chapter, we still have a couple of important points. Lines 7 and 8 are also important. We'll cover those next time. So for now, we're going to jump to the summary. And the summary includes the points made in line 7 and line 8. Together, they form what I call the 5 pillars of power. Answers this question: how can one live a meaningful and memorable life? This is from the very last line, line 8. So the following is what Lao Tzu says in this chapter, and this is taken from the lines from 1 to 7. Number 1, you can live a meaningful, memorable life starting with a good understanding of yourself. And we need to do a lot more work about this. So for instance, next time, I'm going to be challenging everyone with a question: what is your mission in life? What is your mission statement? So understanding yourself. Number 2, developing your self-discipline, which means overcome yourself, overcome your tendency to procrastinate, your potential to get addicted to something. That's number 2. Number 3, to know contentment. Remember, that is where true wealth comes from. Number 4, we just talked about, to proceed vigorously, to have this journey that you can really enjoy, to be clear on where you are going. Number 5, we haven't talked about this yet, we'll talk about this next time, to hold on to your base. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, May the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.